Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you are all well, safe, keeping busy during these hard, crazy times. It's our pleasure to present today our first webinar of the July webinar series of Bluebeam Revu. We're going to have this each Tuesday in July, so this is our first one. Before we jump into it, let me just go over some logistics as usual. First, all our lines are muted so that the presenter can do his job well. You can send us your questions on the chat box or the questions box, and we will be answering that at the end or as we go. This webcast is being recorded for future viewing. That doesn't mean that it's more interesting live. And also we have Bluebeam Revu training, so we can talk about that a little bit at the end. And any questions that you have, you can contact us and we'll be glad to go over anything that you need to know. Without any more delays, it's my pleasure to present our AEC Technical Specialist and Bluebeam Certified Instructor, Ari Redman. Ari, take it away.
Thank you, Raquel. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Ari. I'm a Bluebeam Certified Instructor. And today I'm very excited to show you guys a very special set of webinars. We're going to be doing basically a webinar a week for the month of July. And week one is going to be drawing management and preparation. We're going to be going over file access, profiles, comparisons, and overlays, along with many things like preferences, our keyboard shortcuts and how we can customize them, toolbars and how we can use them to get some really quick and fancy shortcuts in Revu, how to use our thumbnails properly, and how to manage our split screen synchronization so that our comparisons and overlays work really well and they help us to expedite the process. So without further ado, I'm going to show you guys my screen. All right, there we go. And let's switch to Revu. All right, so I've got Bluebeam Revu open right now. And when you first start using Bluebeam Revu, it's really important to get it set up so that it can help your workflow and expedite your processes and make sure that everything is set up ahead of time. You don't really want to reinvent the wheel more than once, so I'll show you guys where to start. So when you first start, of course, it's really important for you to go to the Revu dropdown and you want to click on Preferences. Here you can start to set some settings that are going to help you to succeed when it comes to using Revu. So, for example, I can go to my theme, and if I think that this theme is a little bit too bright in terms of the icons, I can always change it from the dark one to the light one. And this is what the light theme looks like. For presentation purposes, I believe that the icons pop out a little bit better when it comes to using the dark theme, and everybody's used to it. So I'm going to be using the dark theme for this presentation. But now you know that you guys can change it if you want to. All right, so back under preferences, we can also do something that I find really, really cool. And that is to open a home page in a web tab on startup. What this means is you can effectively use Bluebeam Revu as a web browser. And when you open it, a web browser will open, and you can basically use that to navigate quickly, and everything can be done within Revu. We can cycle throughout all of our preferences and make sure that everything here is set according to what we want. This page layout, auto detect by page size, is wonderful, but it can be confusing for some people. This is what will dictate whether or not we go into one full page mode or we fit our page like an 8.5 by 11 sheet and we scroll down and up instead of in and out with our mouse wheel. I'll show you guys how that works and how we can manually change that. Besides that, everything is pretty set in stone. What I do recommend is if you go to navigation and you change the sensitivity from a large number such as 4 to 2, when you zoom in and out, you'll zoom in less with each click of your mouse wheel. So if you want to zoom in a particular way, this can help you guys to get that accurate zooming capability. You can also enable your horizontal scroll bar, for example, and that can allow you to navigate to the left and the right with your mouse if you needed to. I'm not going to use it because it takes up a little bit of screen space, so I'm going to keep mine off. Also, you can make sure that when you synchronize your views, that it automatically sets it to synchronize page instead of synchronize document to begin with. This is quite important, and I'll show you guys the difference between synchronizing our page and our document very soon. Let's go on to another panel here on our preferences. Interface is relatively fine. You can increase the amount of items that you see in your recents. I find it to be useful. It's set to 20 by default, so I've set mine to 25. You can also either increase or basically remove the recent history limit. So in 90 days, my recents will basically disappear from that list, enabling them to refresh automatically. If I don't want them to, I can make sure that they stay there forever if I wanted to. And there's a few other options that we can look at, but what's more important is that we go to the Tools menu right here. And under Markup, there are two really, really important features that we want to turn on. Reuse tools and auto-size text box and callout markups. This is going to make making markups really fast and really, really easy. Reuse tools allows us to remake a markup as soon as we make one, over and over and over again. We don't have to go and click on the button again to redo the markup. So if you're designating 100 different column symbols, then you can easily place them on your sheet one after the other very, very quickly within seconds. And we can also go to Measure, and under Tools and Measure, these settings are actually very useful for dynamic input. All of these have to do with dynamic input, and I've set mine in this procedure. So if you like to, or excuse me, dynamic fill, not dynamic input. Dynamic fill is quite useful if you need to calculate areas of rounded corners and rounded interiors and exteriors. You can basically do that. So I like to set my fill size to 50%, fill speed 30, and boundary size as small as possible at 25, so that I can really get accurate fills and make sure that I'm not using too much time to make a fill. And basically you can keep going through the settings. Nothing here is too crazy. Most of the default settings are pretty good. Something that I do recommend that you make sure is when you go under advanced and 2D rendering, your rendering engine, it could sometimes be set to software by default, and hardware tends to be a little bit smoother and a little bit more reliable, depending on if you have a good graphics card and if your PC isn't too old. So hardware could be better, and you can look into that more by doing some research online. And also, Review 2019 has changed how you can actually reset the program. Now you can do it from within preferences. So if you ever need to reset your program, you can go to the admin panel, and then here you can do a reset. Before you reset, it's very important that you back up. So you can basically make an entire backup of your entire profile, tools, lots of settings and everything. For example, I believe that my backup is found, if I go to Documents, Bluebeam Revu, here we go. I backed up Review in May and I backed up just recently in July. So this backup contains lots and lots of different files. And then you can click on Restore and you can find your backup. This could be quite useful if you need to reset Review if there's a bug going on. So I actually had to reset recently, so I did that. All right, that's basically preferences in a nutshell. So let's click OK. Our preferences are ready to go. Let's do some more preparation. What we want to do is we want to go to the Tools dropdown and then mouse over Toolbars. And by default, the status bar is not turned on. If you look at the bottom of my screen where it says ready on the bottom left corner, once I turn the status bar off, that ready is gone and all of those different functions on that line are gone too. So these functions are really, really great. This ready text is going to give us instructions whenever we use a tool or a markup. So for example, if I use the highlight tool, now instead of saying ready, it's telling me how to use the tool. And there's different ways of using it. And what's quite nice is this also tells us that the highlight tool can not only be used in freeform mode like this, but we can also highlight text perfectly like this. So any vector data or text that was made in some kind of a CAD or BIM program can be treated in very special ways and has special properties that allow us to highlight it in perfect ways. So the status bar is quite useful. Other functions that we have in the status bar include showing our grid. So if we wanted to, we can show the grid like this. As we zoom in, the grid gets a bit more dense. So there's certain thresholds where it gets less dense and more dense, right around here, for example. And if we really wanted to, we could even snap to this grid. So we can turn on snap to grid right here. It's the button right next to it. And now I can use a line tool, for example. And if I wanted to make sure that I snapped exactly to this dot right here, I would just click close to it. So I'm going to click a little far away just to show you guys, for example. And there it is. I've automatically snapped to that dot, and now all the other dots are snappable whenever I want to. So it's quite useful if you guys want to use the grid. Actually, something cool that I'll show you guys is that I use the grid to make this training form right here. So I made this training form in order to train some of my colleagues here at DDS, and I trained a lot of them recently. And you can see that I use the grid to snap these lines right here for this box right here, and so on and so forth. I even put the divider lines perfectly on the grid, and that way I could make a nice clean sheet using this grid. So the grid can be quite useful. For now, I'm going to turn it off because it's a little bit busy on the eyes. And the next button, the third button right here, is called Snap to Content. Snap to Content and Snap to Markup are quite interesting because how they work is If you turn snap to content on, now I can use the line tool, and any vector lines that were made in a CAD or BIM program, I can mouse over and I essentially have snaps. So now I've set myself up so that I can snap to these things. I could perfectly snap from this area to here, for example, and I wouldn't be able to do that without turning on snap to content. Another use of these functions is snap to markup, and we have all these markups here. So if I turn this on, and let's say I wanted to draw from the corner of a markup to another one to link them together. For example, if I wanted to say, please do the markup on the left first and then the one on the right as an instruction, so to speak, I could actually snap from one to the other just like that. What's also nice is I now have these guidelines that are trying to get me to draw markups in relation to other markups. Now I can draw starting right here where it was connecting me to the center of this circle and the upper left corner of this rectangle. So that could be quite useful too. And that's how snap to markup works. I usually keep snap to markup off because I don't need to snap to markups too often. And when I'm trying to draw in between things, snap to markup supersedes this and the leader lines can get a little bit busy and a little bit in the way. So here, for example, I would have a hard time to draw near these checks because it's trying to make me draw in certain areas. So I'm going to turn snap to markup off and I'll keep it off until I need it. Snap to content I tend to keep on because it doesn't really interfere with my drawing. Another really useful tool that we've already gone over in preferences is reuse markups tools. And there it is. So you can turn it on and off. How it works is if I was to use a markup right now, let's actually go to my toolbox and quickly use my column designation markup. This one's cool because I've turned it into a sequence and we're going to be going into markups and sequences in a future webinar. So don't worry, we'll get into that one quite soon. And right now I have this selected. And because I have reuse tools on, reuse markup tools right here, I can simply click, 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 and I can continue designating my columns as quickly as I want to. If I had this turned off, then what would happen is I would have to click once, and then usually, depending on the markup, because it's a sequence, it automatically keeps going. But depending on the markup, it would reset my cursor automatically, and I would have to click on the function itself again. So I don't really want to do that. So that's not really useful. While we're at it, I'm going to show you guys how to select things quickly. By default, Revu uses this pan tool right here. It looks like a little hand tool. And this is great because what you can do is you can either use a left click on a blank part of your sheet and you can grab and hold it and navigate. I recommend that you don't do that and instead use your scroll wheel. If you have a mouse wheel in the middle of your left and right mouse buttons, then you can basically click and hold on that scroll wheel. It's essentially a button in itself. And now I'm using the scroll wheel instead of my left mouse button to navigate. So that can be quite fun. And what really ensures that you're using that proper method and gives you extra functionality is the select tool right here. Now that I've turned that on, I can still use my mouse wheel to navigate around the drawing like this, but I can also select markups and delete them very quickly. So this allows me to activate like a selection marquee instead of just having this hand tool, which is kind of useless because you can accomplish the same thing with the middle scroll wheel button. So now I have the select tool on. Besides reuse markups tools, the last function down here is, let me see what happens if I mouse over it. There we go, synchronize views. So synchronize views is quite useful. It allows us to view two different things. And like I showed you earlier, we can synchronize with page or document. Let's go back to our outline and let's see what topic is next because I do want to go over split screen synchronization while I go over comparisons and overlays. They're very similar to one another and they go hand in hand. Excellent. So we've looked at preferences and we've looked at some toolbars already. Let's look at profiles now. Profiles I've already gone over several times when I do some general webinars, but now we're going to go in depth with them and see how they work. So profile essentially dictates how Revu will look and how your interface looks. Right now, my interface looks a little bit different from the default interface. I have functions split on the left side of my screen, on the right side of my screen, and I have tools at the top, lots of different shortcuts and tools. And how I changed this was I went to the Revu dropdown, I moused over profiles, and I can choose between different kinds of profiles. For example, the default Revu profile looks like this. It maximizes drawing space, puts a few tools on the right side, and all of our major functions are on the left side. So that's quite nice. What I don't like about it is sometimes I'd like to have my toolbox open while I have properties open. So I would rather have properties on the right side and my toolbox can stay on the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Revu dropdown, mouse over profiles. Let's switch to the Revu advanced profile. Now, this one, I've modified it a little bit, but basically this is the default way that this profile looks. So my profile that I customized is actually a copy of this, and I've modified mine just a little bit to make it a bit more user-friendly for me. So let's go back to my profile and turn it on, and I'll show you guys how to make a new profile. We can go to the View dropdown, Profiles, and click on Manage Profile. By the way, if you make any adjustments to a profile, for example, sometimes you'll notice that the form tools turn off every time you open and close Review. So if I want to turn them on and try to see if they will save and see if I can fix that bug, I can go to the Review dropdown, Profiles, and click on Save Profile. And any changes I make to where any of my functions are, whether I move the properties function below the measurement one, for example, just by clicking and holding and dragging it like that. So I could do that, and then I could just basically go here and save my profile. So let's make a new one, Profiles and Manage Profiles. So here, what we can do is, depending on the profile that we have active, we can then click on Add, and it's going to make a copy of that profile, and it'll give us a brand new profile. So even if I click on a profile on the list, it doesn't really make much of a difference. So I'm just going to click on Add. I'm going to call this DDS CAD profile, or prof. That's a good one. And now I have the DDS CAD one. There we go. It's taken all the properties of my profile and it's basically made a new profile called the DDS CAD one. And that's great. So we don't need to keep this one anymore. By the way, if you click on modify, you can rename your profile very easily. I wish it was called rename instead of modify, but there you go. So I can click on this profile and delete it, and there we go. So here's my profile, AR profile, and if I wanted to, I can import another profile that somebody else has, or I can export my profile. So I can export my profile. It now becomes its own file. Here is my profile's copy that I saved back on the 1st of July. So I have a backup just in case. I also have this on a USB drive. I also sent it to myself in an email. So if I ever go to another PC and I need to use my profile again, it's not a problem. I just have to install Bluebeam Revu. I don't really need a license for it. You know, I could use the trial. If I do have a license and I bring my serial number and product key with me, then that's a great idea. And then I can just click on import, find my profile, and I'm good to go. So that is how you can manage your profiles and you can make sure that they work well. When you include dependencies, this means that you're including all the different kinds of other features related to the profile, including tools and tool sets and preferences. So you can have your profile just as it is, just where the buttons are. But when you include dependencies, it's quite powerful. It includes a lot of things. So I recommend that you do that when you make your profile. All right, so let's click on cancel. And that's basically how profiles work. And now we can use my profile to its advantage. I can have properties open. I can have tools open. So when I select a tool, I can then see that my properties changes and I can view my properties while I have tools selected in my toolbox. So I find that to be quite useful. All right, let's see. So we've gone over preferences and profiles. Now let's look at keyboard shortcuts. Let me show you guys where they are. We can go to the Review dropdown and keyboard shortcuts are right here. And so you can see all the different shortcuts that are here in Review. There's also a list of different shortcuts on Revu's website. And we have a PDF if you guys want it so that you can cross-reference and you can learn how to use these shortcuts. Some shortcuts have to involve Shift and Alt, either separately or together. So for example, a polyline is Shift plus N. So you would hold down Shift and then tap the N key. And then you would hold Shift and hold Alt and then press G in order to use the angle measurement tool, for example. And so let's say that you didn't really like some of these keyboard shortcuts and you wanted to customize them for your own purposes. All you need to do is select one of them. Now the shortcut letter is right here. I can click in here. I can now put in a new letter. So for example, let's just arbitrarily put in the letter J. And right now it's telling us that J is assigned to dynamic fill. That's good to know. Whew. So what will happen is it'll say that we need to reassign, select reassign to remove the current keyboard shortcut. And that would mean that dynamic fill would not be J anymore, it would be blank. And I could make arrow J if I wanted to. So that's how you can do it. I would just click reassign right here. If there's any issue, I can always restore defaults. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I delete what I've done here. And there it is. I have not changed anything. I didn't click reassign. So the shortcut is still A. And that's how you manage your keyboard shortcuts. So we can also look at different commands in Review. And there are many different kinds of commands that also use keyboard shortcuts. So if you wanted to, if there's a command that you use often and you want to change it to a key that makes sense to you, especially for your left hand, then you can scroll down the list, find whatever it is, and the same thing works. You would basically click on, let's say full screen, for example. You would click in here, you would change full screen to something else. Let's see if F10 has been taken. Yep, shortcut is reserved. So we have to be careful, and we have to, Review is at least telling us that these shortcuts are in use already if they are in use. So that's quite nice. All right, and that's how keyboard shortcuts work and our command shortcuts work. So those are quite cool. All right, another thing that I want to show you guys is, let's go back to our toolbars. And the same place that we found our status bar, we also have all of these other bars here. Let's turn on form again. Every time I switch profiles, it turns off for some reason. It's a small little bug that's going on with Review. And so I can turn all of these on and off, and I can start to rearrange them. So for example, I can turn form on and off. You can see form is right here every time I turn it on and off like this. And now let's say I wanted to move form. I want to move form so that it's right next to these sign and seal functions right here. Actually, I'd like to remove those functions where form is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold these vertical dots going down. I'm going to move form a little bit to the right, and I'm going to move these vertical dots with the sign document and the add signature field button. I'm going to click and hold them and move them down like this. And there we go. Now I've moved them in this order. I can move form here. I can move this here, and everything is in place. What's really cool is, let's say that I move a lot of things like this, and oh no, now I have to move each one by one, right? Nope, all I have to do is move the rightmost set of tools, and the leftmost ones move with the right one. So now I can essentially squeeze everything together, make sure that everything's tight and that I'm not wasting space. And so this is how we can customize our tools and our shortcuts. We can also right-click in a blank area next to any of our tools, and we can basically access most of them. The status bar, navigation bar, and the properties toolbar are not part of that, so I prefer to go to the tools dropdown and toolbars to make sure that those are turned on as well. And you can see that the keyboard shortcuts associated with these functions are to the right of them. So status bar is F8. If I go to my tools and my markup list, I can see that I have all these different kinds of tools set with a certain letter, and sometimes they might even be set with numbers. So quite cool. Yeah, for example, here's Control 9, Control 0 with all of these functions, etc. And that's basically how those work. So now we know how to customize our toolbars. Let's look at file access and make sure that we understand how to manage our files and how we can basically find them quickly. So file access looks like a little filing cabinet right here on the left side. And file access is pretty cool. You also might notice that for most of our functions, there's always a drop down next to the name of the function. So we can click on that. And for example, we can reopen files from our last session. We can do some fancy BFX file exchanges here if we needed to. So whenever you're looking for specific features, always look for those drop downs. For example, under thumbnails, here's the thumbnails drop down. We're going to go into that one right after file access. But as you can see, we have a lot of different functions here. I'll go over those in just a second. The toolbox also has its own drop down where we can see all of our tools, and we can click on manage tool sets. So these drop downs are really, really useful. Forms has its own drop down, so on and so forth. So let's look at file access now. And let's get rid of properties so that we have a little bit more drawing space. There we go. So how file access works is, instead of going to the file dropdown at the top and going to open recent, which you could do if you wanted to, you don't have as much functionality here. Instead, there's a better way. So the better way is we would go under our recents, and we can see some files that we've already opened. We can also see that some of our files have this pin icon facing to the left. And that means that I've actually already organized these, and I've put them under a category, and I've given that category a name. In particular, this one is called Floor Plans for Presentations. So let's say that I wanted to pin another file. So let's see. I think that this syllabus, this flattened syllabus, is a good one. So we're going to click on the pin icon. As soon as we mouse over it, you can see a pin icon facing down. That means that the icon could be pinned, but it's not currently pinned. So I'm going to click on that, and I have a few options here. I could just pin the file, and it just pins it at the top. I could put it into an existing category. So the floor plans for presentations category, I could definitely put it there if I wanted to. I can make a new category. So I'm going to do that now. We're going to call this one test and click OK. And there it is. I have my test category. I have my files at the top. And what this ensures is that no matter how many files I go through in a day, whether it's 50 files or 100 files or more, that the most important ones that I need to continuously go back to will always be at the top of my file access tab under the categories. Now, if you're doing this for the first time, you're not going to see categories. So categories won't exist, and you just basically have to make your first category, and then when you try to pin files, you'll see that you have multiple categories to choose from. Floor plans for presentations, tests, and I can make a new category if I wanted to. So I'm going to get rid of this category. All it does is it doesn't delete the file from the list. It just gets rid of it from the top of the categories area. That file is still here. And now the pin icon has reset itself back to facing down. And this is how file access works. So file access can be quite useful and quite powerful to manage your local files. This doesn't really work for Bluebeam Studio projects and sessions because they have their own file management system and settings in there. And we're going to be going over Studio projects and sessions in a future webinar. We just recently did an in-depth webinar on it. So if you guys want to, you can check our website to see that again. And we're going to be going over it again in a few months from today. So let's click on our thumbnails tab on the left side. It's the 4 squares button right here. And thumbnails is great because now we can manage all of our different pages in our PDF set. So I have 5 pages here. You guys might have seen me use these pages previously. I have 2 pages that are similar to one another. One is an older version of a revision. So we're going to look at the comparison and overlay tools with those 2 files. And I've also attached our essential syllabus. Right now, because we're doing everything remote, we're not teaching essentials. We are just doing customized training online. Let us know if you guys want training, and I would be happy to train you. And you can see that I'm legit. Here's my Bluebeam Certified Instructor certificate. Yay. Anyway, now let's look at thumbnails and see how it really works. What if I wanted to rotate pages? So I can go here to the thumbnails dropdown. I can mouse over rotate pages and click on it. And now I can select which pages I want to rotate. I can click on the dropdown and I can rotate all of them at once. The current selected page, or excuse me, the current page that we're viewing, I could also select another page and that one could be the one as well. I can do a custom range. So if I wanted to, I can type in 1 to 3. So 1, 2, and 3 would be rotated. Even pages and odd pages is quite nice, along with landscape pages only and portrait pages only. That's quite cool. And we could also change our direction. So we could rotate 90 degrees clockwise, 180 degrees, and counterclockwise 90 as well. So that allows us to rotate in any way that we would like. And we could also save our preferences and load them if we needed to. And that's it. So this is how the rotate pages button works. And we can also go back to thumbnails and we can see that we can insert blank pages. We can insert pages that already exist so we can find them. Now I could browse for one if I wanted to and just look for it and then just put it in there. Here, let's put in this credit card authorization form. Now it's going to ask me, where do I want to insert it? So down here, I can insert it after page 1, or I can insert it after the last page. That's actually what I'd rather do. So I'll put it right there. And I could include bookmarks that are involved, any file attachments that are part of the page. You know, if there's any special document properties, I can merge them if they're not locked. So if the properties are not locked by some sort of a certification or signature, then that's good stuff. And you could also use the file name as a page label if I wanted to. For now, I'm going to leave it as it is, and we're going to click OK. And there it is. I now have this really cool credit card authorization form. I use this as an example to teach people how to edit PDF content, which we're going to be going over during our forms webinar. So don't worry, I'll show you guys how to do that. If you're curious, you can always go to the edit dropdown, PDF content, and you can start to experiment with all of these functions and see how they work. So, all right, good. So I've inserted a page. Now we can see that there's a star next to my file, and that means that I have unsaved changes and I can save them now. So once I click on the save button is grayed out now, and now my file does not have a star next to it, so I know that this is the up-to-date one. So here, let's delete that line and save our changes again. There we go. All right, so we've looked at file access and thumbnails. I believe it's time to look at split screen synchronization and comparisons and overlays. So this is quite exciting. So we can split our screens in a number of ways. We can go down here and we can split our screens vertically or horizontally. I'm going to split mine vertically right here. While screens are split, you might have noticed another function is not grayed out anymore. This is the unsplit function. So if I select a certain screen and I unsplit, that screen stays up and the other screen goes away. So the unsplit function could be quite handy. All right, so now I've split my screen. And now, if I wanted to, let's say that I navigated on one screen, the other one is moving with it. And that's because in our preferences, we've already set ourselves up to synchronize by page. So what does it mean to synchronize by page and synchronize by document? Let's go to our drop-down next to the synchronize button right here, and we're going to change it to document, and I'm going to show you guys what happens. So nothing seems to have happened. Everything seems normal. Wherever I navigate on one side, the other side follows. That's quite nice. What if I switch to another page? Let's switch to this essentials page. Now, the exact same page has mirrored itself on the right side. So when I switch to other pages in a PDF set, the second view will also change to that page. This is what happens when you synchronize by document. You're viewing an exact copy of the same page again. Let's say that you didn't want to do that. Let's say in this case, you wanted to look at the page on the left would be the old revision and the page on the right would be the new one. I need to change this from synchronize document to synchronize page. And now I can make sure that I click on my thumbnail or click inside on the page on the right side, change that to page 3, and it'll be hard to tell. Actually, you can tell by the upper right corner right here, but this is now a completely different page. I'll actually make a more dramatic change, and let's change it to the first floor plan on the left side. And there we go. So now you can view different pages at the same time, but if they happen to be different revisions with different file names, synchronizing by page is quite powerful because now we can see differences between them, and Revu is not going to forcefully change the page on the other view. It's going to keep the page on the one view, and on the other view, it's going to allow you to navigate through it, and it'll still follow along and synchronize. So we can see the differences between our pages like this. Now, this is how we synchronize our pages, but that by itself can still be a bit tedious. I would have to go through my page and I'd have to say, okay, so this is different here and this is different here, and I'd have to mark it up either on a notepad on my PC or with a pen and paper. And Revu is all about eliminating pen and paper and eliminating tedious manual processes. Now we're going to be using the overlay and comparison tools to show you guys how that works. So let's use them. We're going to just keep one page open for now. We're going to go to our document dropdown and let's do compare first. The comparison tool is quite fun. What it's doing is it's now finding any files that I have open. So I have this file open, and that's good. But right now it wants to compare all of my pages, and I do not want to do that. So right now I want to do a custom range comparison where I'm going to be comparing the second page. So we'll type that in right here. Whoops. There we go. And then document B, I'm also going to be opening my main file. Let's open it again. You can compare pages within files, and you can compare different files if you want to. I'm going to be comparing pages in the same file. There isn't much of a difference when you do that. So now I've made it so that I'm going to be comparing page 2 and page 3 with each other. Excellent. That can also change the output folder. So if I wanted to change where this new file is going to be saved, then I can change it. This file is going to have a special name. I'll show you how that works pretty soon. For now, we'll leave it in the default folder. Then manual alignment is quite useful. Let's say that I only wanted to compare a specific portion of the file. I can click on select window and then literally make a box around an area of the screen, and that is the only portion of the page that I'll be comparing. So I could do that to expedite the process as well. Let's say that my building actually moved its location. I'm trying to compare these floor plans. Page 2 is right here, and here's page 3. But let's say the building itself moved 10 feet to the north. The whole thing moved its location due to a big change made by the engineers and the architects on the project. In that case, that's not a problem. I can pick points. So if I click on pick points, I can choose 3 points on each document, and that's going to allow me to manually correct for any alignment issues. So I could do that if I wanted to. In this case, both of the buildings are in the same spot, so I'm good to go. Automatically, I'm going to be opening my comparison in split screen view. This is why I got rid of the other screen before. I want to show you how the comparison tool automatically splits our screen. It's quite nice. And we can choose different kinds of comparison types. We have these 3 different major options. Let's go to the advanced button and let's see what we can do here. Here we can actually make more comparison types. So if I wanted to, I can make a comparison type that would include markups and one that does not include markups. So let's say that I changed some settings. I want my color sensitivity to be a bit higher. My DPI, I'm going to set it to 144, so I'll make it a little bit higher. And in this case, I want to include markups and include flattened markups. The fill colors are fine. They pop out quite nicely. You might notice that the color, which is the border, and the fill color on the inside of the cloud is a little bit lighter than the color itself. So that's quite good. We can either make a revision cloud around our different compared objects, or we can just make it a box. It depends on what we want. Each comparison cloud is going to have its own subject. So in this case, our subject is going to be called the difference, and that's great. Then the new file that's going to be created is going to be a copy of the second document, which happens to be the third page, and it's going to be called _diff at the end of the file name. So everything here is good. Most of the default settings are great. If I wanted to, by the way, I could make a new custom comparison, and when I'm done, I can click on save. It's going to ask me to give it a name. So I'm going to say AR compare and dash markups. So this is going to include all markups. Okay, now let's click OK. Our comparison is ready. Let's click OK one more time. The comparison is now generating itself, and there we go. Beautiful. Now let's change our view on the right side to the second page, because document B is the third page, and we already have a copy of that on the left side. You'll notice that we have all of these nice revision clouds, and so we can quickly see where we have any changes. So here I can see that something changed. This is pretty obvious that the change was the door itself being added to the new version, and it was removed from the previous old version. The old version is on the right, the new one is on the left. And we can see that more changes happen here. We could really stare at it for a long time and guess as to what happened, but it's very hard to tell what happened here. So let's not worry about what happened, because at least we know where it happened. The overlay tool will show us what happened very soon. So we can see that some changes were made here, and very quickly I can also see that a couple changes were made here. And because I had my markups turned on, these two markups that I added to the new sheet were identified, and they are also changes. So that's quite nice. Now, the comparison tool is great, but by itself, it only really tells us where a change is made. It doesn't really tell us what it was made. So I have an acronym that I use for compare documents and overlay pages. Compare where, overlay what. So let's see what changed by clicking on the overlay pages tool. Now it's going to look for documents that are currently open. So it's found the _diff page. I don't want to use that. That is its own page in itself. It is not to be compared. Instead, the second one is in quite good shape. This is going to be the second page. So that one will be, let's see, let's actually change that color to red. So we're going to click on that. We're going to click on modify. And let's make sure that that one is red. And now we're going to add a new file. I could add open files, but that would just add the _diff file, so we don't want that. We're going to add another file. Let's make sure that we choose the correct file. So we're going to click on the three dots here. Let's go all the way down to our Bluebeam folder. Here is our file. Excellent. Now we want to compare page 3. So we're just going to type in 3 right there. And there we go. Or excuse me, we're going to overlay page 3 on top of page 2. So the color for that, we're going to change that to a nice bright green. There we go. Let's make it, yeah, I think that's a good brightness. We can also change some different settings here if we needed to. So the opacity, if we don't want it to be at 100%, we can set it a little bit lower. I think that 100% stands out a bit better. I also recommend that you use the darken blend. The other blends could be useful, but sometimes they get a little bit busy, and the darken one basically just shows you everything you need to see. And we could also select a region if we needed to, a specific region. Everything here looks pretty good now. So we have our old revision as 2, and the new one is, excuse me, our old revision is red, and the new one is going to be green. Let's also edit defaults and look and see how they work. So these defaults here, quite interesting. What we could do is we could make it so that we could have a custom range, or we can make it so that when we overlay, all pages are overlaid automatically. So that can be quite quick if you needed it to. We can also change our blend overall if we needed to, so we can change the way the overlay actually looks. And you guys can experiment with these and tell me which ones you guys like the most. I think the darkened one is the best one. I've experimented with a few of them, and I find them to be a bit too busy and a bit harsh on the eyes. And then you can see how these colors work here on the left side. So by default, red will be the first overlay page, and the second one will be green. And the other primary colors will be used until there's too many things to overlay and you have to change them into gray and black. So I think that overlaying about 2 things at once usually is what happens. So red and green contrast each other quite nicely. All these other settings are fine. We're going to click OK, and we're going to click OK one more time. All right, and our overlay is generating. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. So now we're going to move our overlay to the right side. I'm just going to click and hold it. Whoops, it was a little bugged out just now. There we go. Now you can see I have, if I click and hold it, I can see that there's a little arrow on the upper corners right here. So I can now move it next to other files. Let's get rid of the example floor plan. Actually, we'll leave it open right now over there. And now we can use our overlay and our comparison in conjunction. So the comparison tells us where something happened, and the overlay tells us what. So here we can see that this door was added because green is the new stuff and red is the old. So there used to be a wall here, now it's gone. Now, let's look at what happened in Office 249 and Copy 250. Aha, now we can clearly see that the office got larger in the revision. So without having to guess, we can see exactly what happened with our overlay function, and comparison helped us find it. We could just use overlay by itself, but sometimes we might miss a couple of changes since the colors can be a little bit hard to see sometimes. And so this is why we use them in conjunction with each other. So now we can see that we have an extra toilet stall, and we can see what changes were made here. We used to have the scale and the name of the sheet here. It's now gone. We now have this new box right here, this border. It probably has to do with this column right here. I wouldn't be surprised. And of course, we can see that there were changes in terms of these markups, but there weren't actually changes from the sheet. So they're not really showing the old one there. It doesn't do that with markups. It'll show the old things with vector data. So markups, it'll just say that something changed, but the overlay tool is not really used for markups. So, and that's it. This is how we can use the overlay and comparison tools to really help us to see what changed in our files. And with that, now I believe all of you are prepared to use Revu. You now have your profiles ready. You have your settings and preferences correct. You've turned on lots of different kinds of toolbars, and you've made sure that everything is customized to your liking. If you want to have more drawing space, you can turn off certain toolbars that you don't need to use very often. So for example, if you're not going to be sending objects to the back or front, then you can turn that one off. And you can experiment and see which of these functions you use the most and which ones you don't. There is one more thing I want to show you guys before we conclude today. There's actually a way to add special tools to your functions here. For example, the save as function is not here by default. Let me show you how I put that right here. We go to the tools dropdown, toolbars, and we can click on customize. So here, I can now go under my categories and all the different sets of tools are here. So under file, I know that save as is right here. And so I would go to my toolbar right here. I would choose the one that I have. So here's my file toolbar. And you can see that there's a bunch of other functions in the file toolbar that are not turned on by default. For example, save all. If I wanted to save all my files all at once, I can turn this function on and I can use it. So I can literally just use the check right here. But before, the save as button was not here. Let me get rid of it and show you guys how I put it here. All I have to do is click on it on the list on the left side, make sure that my file toolbar is selected on the upper right side, and then I can click on Save As. I can click on this arrow right here, and it moves it to the right side. I can now click on it on the list and move it all the way up. So now I have Save and Save As right next to each other, and Save All is also turned on. Let's look on the upper left of my screen, and as I click OK, you're going to see that it now added the Save All button right there. Save As is back where it was before, and this is how we can customize our toolbar. So if there's redundant tools that you don't need to see twice, for example, the flatten tool is seen in two of these toolbars right here and here, you can get rid of the flatten tool in one of the toolbars. Saves you a little bit of space, right guys? All right, and with that, I believe that concludes our webinar. Does anybody have any questions? Let's see if Raquel is in, and let me turn on my webcam. Let me check the attendees and see what's going on. It looks like Raquel and Sandra have muted themselves. Can anybody hear me? Hello.
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 Hello. Thank you, Ari, for a great presentation. That was awesome. I have questions coming in. All right. So with no more delays. The first thing is, can you please go back and show us once again where you find the keyboard shortcuts?
Yes, absolutely. So keyboard shortcuts can be found by going to the review dropdown, and here's keyboard shortcuts right underneath profiles. So once you're there, you can see all the different shortcuts that you have. Now you know.
Right.
Any other
Okay,
questions?
now, yeah. Well, this question is, you're gonna have to elaborate questions about callouts.
Mm.
Is there a way to add extra letters to callouts, but on other side?
Oh, that's a great question. I've actually never delved into it yet. We're not going into markups this webinar, but let's actually look at it and let's see what we can do. So I believe, let's actually get rid of our difference file and let's get rid of our overlay file. So let's try and make a call out. And let's see if we can add more than one leader to this call out. So here, let me get rid of my webcam so you guys can see the majority of my screen. Oops, there we go. Perfect, you guys should see my screen now. Let me actually check. Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna make a call out now. So I'm gonna point here, move the call out here, type data, my call out is ready. Now, let's try to add another leader to it. I would assume that if you right click on top of it, yep, you can add a leader. So that's all you have to do, right click and then add leader. And there, now I have another leader. Now I believe your question was, you wanted to have a leader on the other side of the call out.
Yeah,
Let's
is
see
there a
if we
way
can
to add
move this.
extra letters, but he on the other side, exactly?
Yeah, that's a good point. Interesting. It looks like it keeps the leaders stuck to this vertice. Let me see what happens if I right click on top of this. Very interesting. It looks like at this point, it's not possible. I do have a workaround for you. Luckily, this is not the end of the world. So let's get rid of this leader. Quite interesting. So the way to circumvent this would be to make the arrow tool, and you would basically want to point. You would start from another markup, and then you would point to something else. This is one way to do it. It's not the best alternative, but at least that's something that you could do in time. This is an interesting thing. What I'd like to do is I'd like to submit this as a feature request to Bluebeam themselves, and hopefully they'll allow us to move our leaders to the other side of the text. I'll actually submit a ticket to Bluebeam Revu, and I'm going to see if maybe there's something that I'm missing. Maybe I don't know how to do it properly, but it just doesn't seem like you can really change the vertice once you make a new leader. That's very interesting. Thank you very much for that question. At this time, I don't know if it's possible. Very good
So when
question.
you follow up and research, Ari, maybe we can get back to him.
Absolutely, yeah. If you have the name of that person, then we can send
Yes.
an email and we'll keep in touch. That sounds good.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. There is another question about exactly leaders on callouts. It's you can add leaders to callouts, but not to Cloud Plus markups, right?
Huh, interesting. Let's look at that right now. So let's see if we can add it to a Cloud Plus. So I have a Cloud Plus right here. I'm going to right click on top of it, and I am able to add control points, which are simply just grips, but no, I cannot add leaders to Cloud Pluses. Let me see what happens if I right click on top of this one. No, so it looks like the Cloud Plus only allows you to have one call out associated with it. Let's make it one more time and let's see what happens. So tools, markup, Cloud Plus, make a Cloud Plus right here. Here is our call out automatically being generated. Type data, and let's see if we go into our properties and see if we can add a leader. I'm going to the callout properties right here, and let's see, I can change the line width, but I don't think I can add another leader right here. And yep, from what I can see, no, I don't believe it's possible. Very good question. Another feature request could be sent to Bluebeam for this. That would enable us to make as many callouts as we wanted to for one cloud. I think to avoid confusion, they made it so that one callout would be associated with each cloud. If you really wanted to make a callout associate with the cloud again, and you want to have more than one, another way around this would be to simply make a callout, and then that way you could point to the cloud, such as I can point right here, and then I can move my callout here, and I can type data. So that is a workaround for now. It's not the best workaround, but it works. If you need to, for example, get rid of this arrow, then you can click on, in properties, you can click on end and turn it into a line. That way it kind of looks like this is part of the cloud. So actually, I can't really tell a difference.
That is a
But
nice workaround.
yeah, it's visually very pleasing, but I can completely understand why you would want more than one call out. So Good question. Very good question. I'll submit a
And,
feature request for you.
And so you guys know, we keep, Ari keeps sending always feature requests to Bluebeam, and Bluebeam is really very good at listening to customers' requests or resellers' requests, and they take that into consideration for future releases. So that is a good thing that they pay attention to very closely. So we are glad to hear that you're gonna send more to them.
Oh yeah.
More, Ari, thank you. Okay, so we have another question. It says, can you rotate a page without rotating its thumbnail?
Yes, that's a great question. Let me show you guys how that works. Let me turn off my camera so you can see it better. So how that works is, let's say that I wanted to rotate my view or the page itself, but I want my thumbnail to remain as it is. So when I print it, it will always print right side forward. But if I wanted to rotate it just to see something very quickly, I can go to the view dropdown and I can go to rotate view. So if I rotate my view clockwise, notice what happens in the thumbnails list. Nothing. The thumbnail is still this right side up. And as I zoom in on certain parts of the page, it will still show it as if it is facing right side up. But I've still rotated the view. Now let's go back to rotate view. Let's make it counterclockwise and put it back. Now let me show you how to rotate the page overall. I think we already saw it earlier, but we can go to the thumbnails dropdown. We can click on rotate pages, or we can right click on top of a page, and then we can click on rotate pages. So now I'm going to rotate this one clockwise 90 degrees. And so now in the thumbnails, you can see the page is rotated and the view is rotated. If I was to now go to view, rotate view, and go clockwise again, my page is now upside down, but on the thumbnail itself, it's rotated to the right just 90 degrees. So that's how there's a difference between rotate view and the actual rotate button. So let's actually move this counterclockwise again, and then we're going to rotate this counterclockwise 90 degrees. There we go. Everything is now fixed. And so that's how you can rotate your view without rotating your thumbnail.
All right. Okay, next question. Can shortcuts be moved to the left and the right panels?
Oh, yes, that's a great question. Yes, they can. So all of these tools that I have at the top of my screen, I have them here because I prefer them to be here. But if I really wanted to, I can click on any of these groups. So let's click on this group right here with these 4 functions, and I can just click and hold. I can not only drag them on my screen anywhere I want to, but I can actually move them to my right panel right here. And now let's move another one to the left panel. We'll move the forms button all the way to the left panel. So yeah, these can definitely be moved to the left and the right if you want to. And you can have as many as you'd like up over there.
It's very accommodating, the interface. All right. Okay, thank you. I have another question. What is the difference between snapping to markups and snapping to content? Ari, can you hear me? Ari? Hello? 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 Ari? Ari, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, now I can. I hope that our audience can hear us. I lost you for a second. I'm sorry about that, guys.
Glitched out. Yeah, I just unplugged it and replugged it in. It should be fine now.
Okay, thank you guys for staying with us.
Was there anything
another question.
That I missed out on the last one, or no?
I think that the disconnection was after you answered the question about moving the shortcuts. So we're fine.
Great.
No, the next question is, what is the difference between snapping to markups and snapping to content?
Oh, yes, good. So yeah, we covered that earlier, but let's go over that again. So if you look at the 2 functions down here, snap to content means that any data that is already been made and is part of the PDF. So if it was made in a CAD or BIM program, it's considered content. So all of this is considered content, all of these lines, all of this text, everything that you have here, everything has snaps associated with it. And this is called content. So vector data is considered content. And then when it comes to snapping to markups, that has to do with the actual markups themselves. So if I wanted to go to the corner of this markup, not a problem. I can snap from this corner and I can snap to the content of this number 8 right here, this circle, and I can snap perfectly. So this allows us to basically snap right on top of markups and content, and now you know the difference between them. I recommend that you snap the markup off so that it doesn't interfere with your work while you're working.
Sounds really, really good. Thank you very much. That's all I see on my end. That's all the questions I have. Thank you so much, Adi, for a great presentation and answering all these great questions. Thank you guys for being with us today on our first of our webinar series in July. And thank you for your questions. The next webinar will be next Tuesday. So we have a date for that day, July 14. And that will be at 2 p.m. If you have any questions, as usual, you can email us at info@ddscat.com. You can call us, as you know, where we are, 305-445-6480. If you or any of your groups or any of the companies that you work with is interested in having any review training, please let us know. We are very accommodating with this situation that we have now. So we do the remote training, and it will be our pleasure to go over your needs. Our blog is live. It's been live for a while and has a lot of interesting information. So check it out. Where is the link? Again, thank you everybody for being with us today. Thank you, Adi. Have a great day.
Thank you, Raquel. Take care, everybody.